Okay, well, thank you, Marissa, for introducing me. Uh, well, okay. Welcome, everyone. Let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Amalia Musters. I'm a data scientist at Nodelize. And today I'm here to talk about how dashboards often don't drive decisions and how we can use storytelling, custom visuals, and embedded analytics to bridge the gap. But first, let me just talk about what Nodelize is. Founded in 2017, Nodelize makes data analytics accessible to organizations of all sizes. We deliver tailored solutions to our clients to make them more data-driven and to enable them to make smarter decisions and have greater success. At Nodelize, we operationalize your data as a service. And we do that by combining the strengths of our three core departments: analytics, software development, and cloud. And we deliver fully managed, tailored, and integrated solutions into your operations. We currently support over 50 global customers with a team of 25 employees, and we're still expanding. We operate primarily in Western Europe, and our data center is located in the Netherlands. Okay, so enough about Nodelize. Let's just dive into the session. And I would like to pose two questions to you to think about for a few seconds. And the first question is, how many dashboards does your organization have today? And then the second question is, how many of them actually change decisions? Most companies don't have a data problem. They have a communication problem. And that is actually what this session is about closing that gap, turning insight into impact. So let's look at the overview of this session. First, we'll look at the gap and see what the gap actually contains. Then we'll look at how clarity and context are a solution to that, as well as customization, engagement. We'll finalize this session with a few key takeaways, and finally, there is some time for Q&A. Okay, the gap. Well, to this day, we've become very good at generating insights, but much less effective at actually turning them into action. And indeed, visualizing data is not necessarily creating a deeper understanding of our data. And in the same matter, insights do not already create action. And there are a few reasons why dashboards often don't lead to decisions. The first reason is they overwhelm instead of clarify through an overload of charts, cluttered layout, no narrative, and no prioritization. The second reason is they fail to connect to the business. So we have our insights, but what does it mean for the business? What problem does it actually solve? The third reason is they assume users are analysts. Not everyone is an analyst, and so you need to tailor your solution to your audience. And finally, they aren't embedded where the work happens. Dashboards that are embedded into the workflow are much more effective. Okay, what does that look like in real life? I'm going to show you a dashboard that you've probably seen before and maybe even created yourself, and it's a dashboard that communicates absolutely nothing. I call it the Christmas tree dashboard. It's a dashboard full of colorful lights, I would say. It has too many chart types, different color palettes, no hierarchy or alignment. It doesn't guide the user. This is an overwhelming dashboard that causes cognitive load and disengagement. This dashboard just screams for attention in every corner. And what happens when you have this dashboard is when everything is important, nothing really is important anymore. The pie chart with 18 categories visual is another of this type of visuals, I would say. There are too many categories, colors are not useful, small labels that are unreadable. Well, just another example of an unuseful visual. So we have seen two types of overwhelming visuals at this point in time. But there is another type of visual that requires some attention. And that is actually the visual that is maybe even invisible. And that's the dashboard that lives on an island. This dashboard is practically invisible, because if a dashboard is not where the people work, it doesn't matter how good the visuals are, the dashboard will just die on the island. So, now that we have identified common reasons why dashboards fail, like they're overwhelming, they lack meaning, they require too much expertise, and they don't appear where the decisions happen, how does SAS Viya solve it? With SAS Visual Analytics, we can use storytelling, custom visualization, and embedded interactivity to solve this problem. And we have translated the problems and the reasons why dashboards fail into 3 key principles that drive action. The first is clarity and context, through storytelling with design and layout strategies. The second is customization, through custom visualizations for different audiences. And finally, we have engagement, embedded analytics where the work actually happens. And we can use these principles for one goal, and that is to communicate insights through these principles to drive action using SAS Viya. Okay, so let's look at the first principle, clarity and context. So what do I mean with clarity and context? One thing that is important to remember is people don't remember dashboards, they actually remember the story behind it. And storytelling actually reduces cognitive load, and it increases clarity by structuring insights and a guided path rather than a collection of charts. For storytelling, we need two things. The first is we need to draw the attention of the user. And after that, we need to keep the attention. We need to keep the users engaged, because we know dashboards often fail not because the data is wrong, but they fail because there is no narrative. There is no narrative flow. Well, and to create the clarity and context, we use 2 things, dashboard design and layout strategies. Let's look at the first one. So what do I mean with dashboard design? I'm actually referring to principles in graphic design. In graphic design, there are a few functional guidelines, such as unity, negative space, hierarchy, variety, emphasis, and these are principles that can be used to create visually effective and cohesive compositions. Let me just show you a few examples of this. So, in the left example, the Pocket Penguins page, there is a clever use of negative space through the layout of the book covers, as well as the logo that is centered in the page. This creates a sense of balance, and it emphasizes the logo. In the middle, we see that the title immediately draws the attention. After that, we go to the subtitle and the button, and after that, it's very likely that you notice the visuals on the right. So this really guides the user through the page. And this is also a clever use of hierarchy and emphasis. And finally, we have an example of Duolingo. You might know it. It's a language app. And they use bold colors, fun animations, to give you a sense of fun and engagement. And that's a way to use variety. Okay, so besides dashboard design, we can use layout strategies to create clarity and context. With design and layout strategies, we can guide users through visualizations. We can use, for example, UX laws, user experience laws. There are many laws. I won't bother you with all of them, But there are a few that are pretty interesting. For example, Jacob's Law, Hicks' Law. And the Jacob's Law is all about familiarity. And it says that users expect websites or dashboards to be designed in a certain way that is consistent with what people are used to. And then we have Hicks' Law. And Hicks' Law says that the more options we have, the harder it is to make decisions. And this all comes down to cognitive load again. We don't want to overwhelm the users. So we really want to take these laws into account. Besides these laws, we also have guided insights through drill downs, click-throughs, pop-ups, scenario exploration through filters, and finally highlights using key performance indicators or dynamic text. This is an example of a Dutch dashboard that we created for a client. It was a client active in primary education in the Netherlands. And, well, I've replaced the logo, as you can see. But this dashboard contains a few of the principles and things I've just mentioned. For example, Jacob's Law. There is another page that is exactly structured like this page. So it's very consistent. We've used some principles like negative space. There are a few pop-ups, drill downs, custom visuals. So we've done our best to put everything in there. Let me just walk you through it. So here we have an overview of the student group. There are some filters there, some buttons. We'll look at it later. Here we can drill down to see a few more details in the data. We can go back. We can move to some custom visuals. Here we have a radar chart that we created. Another chart that we created in SAS. And if we click the button, we get an overview and a little more detail of the data. So we have a pop-up. Then we can move to an individual page. And as I said, this looks exactly the same because it has the same data just for an individual. And then we also have a table. It's a table you can interact with. It's very intuitive. And it has a SAS job behind it for those who want to know what it is. And the reason I wanted to show you is on each page, there are different ways that we use to guide users through the dashboard. Okay, so we know storytelling reduces cognitive load. And it adds clarity. But for some insights, we need richer custom visuals. So that is indeed where custom visuals come in. So let's move to the second key principle of customization. Okay, so I've just shown you this teacher dashboard for the primary education client. We have actually created another dashboard for the same client, but it was targeted to a different audience. It was targeted to students, and the data behind it is actually the same. But we needed to create a different view and a different dashboard for a different audience. And we did that using several custom visualizations. One of them is the medals, of course. You can see them at the bottom. The other one is the lollipop plot. And for this, we used data-driven content objects, which are available in SAS VA. I will show you just in a minute where you can find them. This lollipop plot was created using a JavaScript library, the D3 library. And here you can see some interaction with this dashboard. You can see that you can click on, well, you can hover on the medals, you can interact with the lollipop plot, and it gives you an idea of how it works. Some people might have noticed that we have a football game at our booth. Nodalize had a football game during this SAS Innovate, and we also created a dashboard besides that. And in that dashboard, there were some visuals that were actually created using another JavaScript library, chart.js. So that's another way to use custom visuals in your dashboard. And then we have Plotly. And Plotly provides highly interactive visualizations, especially useful for data scientists and people familiar with Python. Well, in our case, we created these visuals for a manufacturing client. They had very specific requirements, and we were able to meet those requirements using Plotly. And then we can also create a chat interface. This is actually a chat interface integrated into your SAS dashboard. And with this interface, you can talk to your data behind the dashboard. So there are different ways to integrate custom visuals. How does that look in VA? Well, we have our teacher dashboard again. And as I said, there is a custom visual in there. The radar chart is one. It was created using D3. And what it actually is, it's an HTML page with some JavaScript. And it's embedded inside a data-driven content object. I don't need to tell you much more, because that's basically what it is. But I will just show you how it looks in SAS VA. This is probably a familiar view. So here you have the objects that are available to you to use in your VA. I like the precision container, that's just a tip. It's very useful. And there you have the data-driven content object, as well as an image, text. And the funny thing about the data-driven content object is that it works exactly the same as other objects in your SAS VA. So as you can see on the right, you can just add data roles, just as you would usually do. So that also means that the data that you add to this custom visual is just updated in real time. Okay, so we're moving on to the final key principle that drives action. Engagement. So, remember the dashboard that lives on an island? Well, we do not want that. We want to integrate a dashboard into workflows. And that is where embedding comes in. This is a familiar customization. We've seen it before. But the difference is we have added these visualizations into an app. So we created our own app. It's a Nodalize app. And in this app, there is a chatbot, there is a dashboard. Well, you can add different applications so that you have everything in one application. For another client, we embedded their SAS VA report into their WordPress page. So what we did was we took some objects from their report, we embedded them into iframes, for those who know. And that is how you can embed entire reports or objects from reports into, for example, a WordPress page. Okay, this is a familiar image. The only thing changed is that you can embed an entire report or parts of it into an app, a mobile app, a website, whatever you like. Again, I don't need to tell you much more, because this is just what it is. And SAS has some very useful things for that. For those who are technical and would like to know, you can use the SAS VA SDK, the software development kit, to do this, to create such embeddings. And, well, to go into a little more detail, a piece of code, because I like code, that you can use to embed an object. Okay, so let's move back to where we started. So, first we identified a few reasons why dashboards fail. And we identified some key principles to drive action and to solve the problems of dashboards. We've seen how clarity and context, customization and engagement can bridge the gap between insights and action. So indeed, when we design analytics with clarity, we add context, we make them usable and customize them, and we place them where the work happens, we can transform dashboards into decisions. And that is where I would like to end this presentation. If you'd like to know more, you can contact Nodalize. And, well, I would like to thank you for your attention.
All right, do we have any questions? We have.
Thank you for the great presentation. It was really insightful, especially for us. We're from a medical center where we're working on the intensive care unit, and we're also building dashboards, of course, also with your help. And I'm thinking for us, this is really relevant because, for example, we have a nursing workload dashboard, and we see that now the integration in the workflow is still quite limited. How do you define for what certain stakeholders the dashboard design is the best way of designing it?
Ooh, that's a tough question. um, I would love to say that there is a structured way to do this. I'm not sure whether there is. I think it very much depends on your case. I have seen your presentation and I know a little bit about the solution. And I think one very difficult thing with your solution is that there are many different stakeholders that actually use the same application. So that makes it quite difficult to get everyone on the same page. But I would say applying those general design principles and using the UX laws as kind of a foundation for it already helps a lot. And then you might need to customize a few visualizations, for example, here and there, just to really target the right audience. But I think using everything as a solid foundation will already help you a little bit.
Thanks. Well, we will ask your expertise after the session.